Spring 1814, Thornfield Hall, Derbyshire. Miss Catherine Zellwood stood before the imposing oak doors of Thornfield Hall, clutching her small valise in one hand and a letter of employment in the other. A sharp April breeze tugged at her bonnet, and she reached up to secure it, taking a deep breath as she did so. 3 years as a governess had taught her that first impressions were everything, particularly when one was entering the household of a duke. The Duke of Marlingham, a man she knew only by reputation, had lost his wife 2 years prior. Society whispered that he had become a recluse, appearing in London only when his parliamentary duties demanded it. His 3 children, according to her instructions, were in desperate need of a steady hand and proper education. The Duke's sister had arranged the position, having heard of Catherine's excellent references from her previous post with the Farringtons. Catherine lifted the heavy brass knocker and let it fall. The sound echoed through what she imagined to be cavernous halls within. After a moment, the door swung open to reveal a dignified butler whose expression remained carefully neutral as he assessed her. "Miss Zellwood, I presume?" he inquired. "Yes. I am expected, I believe." "Indeed, madam. I am Simmons. His Grace was informed of your arrival." He stepped aside to allow her entry. "I shall show you to the drawing-room where Lady Eleanor awaits." Catherine followed him across a marble entrance hall that seemed designed to make visitors feel insignificant. Portraits of stern-faced Marlinghams gazed down at her from gilded frames, their eyes seeming to follow her progress with aristocratic disdain. The butler opened a set of double doors and announced, "Miss Catherine Zellwood, my lady." Lady Eleanor Marlingham, sister to the Duke, rose from her seat by the fire. She was a handsome woman of perhaps 40, dressed in a fine morning gown of pale blue silk. Her smile was welcoming, if somewhat reserved. "Miss Zellwood, how delightful to meet you at last. Your letters of recommendation were most impressive." "You're most kind, Lady Eleanor," Catherine curtsied. "I hope I shall meet your expectations." "I have no doubt you shall. The children are in dire need of structure. Since their mother's passing, they have had 2 governesses already, neither lasting above 6 months. They are not bad children, merely spirited." Catherine nodded, understanding the euphemism all too well. "Spirited children often possess the brightest minds, my lady. They simply require proper guidance to channel their energies." "Well said." Lady Eleanor gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. We shall have tea while I acquaint you with your duties." As Catherine took her seat, the door to the drawing-room burst open. A girl of about 11 dashed in, her dark curls flying and her muslin dress stained with what appeared to be mud. "Aunt Eleanor. Frederick put a frog in Nanny's sewing basket and now she's threatening to leave." The girl skidded to a halt when she noticed Catherine. "Oh. Is this the new governess? Frederick said you be ancient and have a wart on your nose." "Sophia." Lady Eleanor's voice was sharp with mortification. "Where are your manners? Apologize to Miss Zellwood at once." The girl offered an unrepentant curtsy. "I beg your pardon, Miss Zellwood. I merely repeated what my brother said. I myself never believed you would have a wart." Catherine bit the inside of her cheek to prevent herself from smiling. "I am gratified to hear it, Miss Sophia. And may I say, I am equally relieved to find you are not the fire-breathing dragon I had been warned about." Sophia's eyes widened before she broke into delighted laughter. "Oh, I like her, Aunt Eleanor." "That will do, Sophia. Please inform your brothers that Miss Zellwood has arrived, and you are all to present yourselves in the schoolroom in 1 hour's time, properly washed and attired." "Yes, Aunt." The girl darted from the room with the same energy with which she had entered. Lady Eleanor sighed. "You see what we contend with. Sophia is 11, Frederick is 9, and young Henry is 7. They run wild over the estate. His Grace is often occupied with estate matters or in London, and I confess I have not your expertise in child-rearing." "I understand, my lady. Children who have suffered loss often act out to reclaim control over their world." Something in Lady Eleanor's expression softened. "You speak as one with personal knowledge, Miss Zellwood. I lost my parents young, Catherine admitted. My father was a scholar at Oxford, and after his passing, my education became my comfort. I hope to provide the same solace to your niece and nephews. A most admirable sentiment. A new voice entered the conversation, deep, rich, and undeniably masculine. Catherine turned to find a tall figure standing in the doorway. The Duke of Marlingham was not at all what she had expected. The gossip sheets had not mentioned that the reclusive peer was so young, scarcely more than 30, she guessed, nor that he possessed such striking features. His hair was the colour of mahogany, his eyes a startling blue against his sun-bronzed skin. Most peers of the realm were pale creatures who rarely ventured outdoors without proper cover. This man looked as though he regularly worked alongside his tenants. Your Grace, Catherine rose hastily and curtsied deeply. Forgive me, I did not hear you enter. No apology necessary, Miss Zellwood. I move quietly, a habit acquired from attempting to catch my children in their various misdeeds. He stepped into the room with the easy confidence of a man who knew his place in the world. I trust my sister has explained your duties. We were just discussing them, Kendrick, Lady Eleanor replied. Miss Zellwood comes with excellent recommendations from the Farrington family. Yes, I recall the correspondence. His gaze lingered on Catherine, assessing. 3 children in that household, was it not? 4, Your Grace. 2 boys and 2 girls, ranging from 6 to 14 years of age. And you managed them all without resorting to tyranny? Impressive. My offspring respond to governance about as well as Parliament responds to reason. Catherine couldn't help but smile at the comparison. Children, like parliamentarians, Your Grace, require firm boundaries and the occasional illusion that the ideas put forth were their own. A flash of amusement crossed his face, there and gone in an instant. Well reasoned, Miss Zellwood. I look forward to seeing your methods in practice. He turned to his sister. Eleanor, Lord Haverton's steward has arrived to discuss the northern boundary issue. Would you excuse us, Miss Zellwood? Catherine curtsied again. Of course, Your Grace. As she followed a maid to her quarters, Catherine reflected that the Duke was nothing like the brooding, heartbroken widower she had imagined. He seemed contained, certainly, but not broken. His eyes, though guarded, held intelligence and a spark of something she couldn't quite name. Whatever his temperament, it was not her concern. She was here to teach his children, not to puzzle out their father. Her room was modest but comfortable, with a small sitting area adjoining a bedchamber. A desk positioned before the window overlooked the extensive gardens, providing ample light for preparing lessons. After unpacking her few belongings, Catherine made her way to the schoolroom on the 3rd floor. The chamber was well appointed with a large table, bookshelves filled with volumes both educational and entertaining, maps upon the walls, and a globe positioned near the window. 3 children sat in a row, scrubbed clean but with barely contained energy evident in their fidgeting postures. Good afternoon, Catherine greeted them, setting her lesson books upon the desk. I am Miss Zellwood, your new governess. Frederick, a lanky boy with his father's auburn hair, raised an eyebrow. Until you flee in despair, you mean? Miss Penworthy lasted only 4 months, and she claimed to have tamed the children of a barbaric Scottish earl. How fascinating, Catherine replied evenly. I've never fled anything in my life, Master Frederick, and I don't intend to start now. Henry, the youngest, giggled. With his cherubic face and golden curls, he appeared deceptively angelic. Miss Penworthy fled after Frederick put a garden snake in her bed. She screamed so loud Papa came running with his pistol. I see. Well, I'm rather fond of garden creatures myself, having grown up in the countryside. Catherine took a seat at the desk. I once had a pet toad named Aristotle who lived in my garden. He was quite helpful with the insects. Sophia's eyes widened. You named a toad after a philosopher? Indeed. He had a most thoughtful expression. Catherine smiled. Now, before we begin our lessons, I should like to know what subjects you enjoy, and which you find challenging. I enjoy nothing about lessons, Frederick declared. I'd rather be riding or fishing. I like drawing, Sophia offered. And poetry. But I despise arithmetic. I like stories, Henry said shyly. Especially about knights and dragons. Catherine nodded. Very well. Master Frederick, did you know that navigation for riding and sailing requires complex mathematics? And Miss Sophia, did you know that poetry often follows mathematical patterns? As for you, Master Henry, the best stories are those that teach us something about the world, which is what lessons aim to do as well. The children exchanged glances, uncertain how to respond to this approach. I propose an arrangement, Catherine continued. Each day, we shall divide our time between necessary subjects and those you prefer. If you apply yourselves diligently to the former, we shall have ample time for the latter. Does that seem fair? What if we don't agree? Frederick challenged. Then we shall spend all our time on the necessary subjects until you change your mind, Catherine replied cheerfully. Now, let us begin with an assessment of where you stand in your studies. By the end of the afternoon, Catherine had gained a clear picture of their educational standings. Sophia was advanced in literature but struggled with mathematics. Frederick possessed a quick mind for figures but detested sitting still long enough to complete his work. Young Henry showed promise in all areas but lacked confidence. As they worked, Catherine caught glimpses of their personalities beyond their initial presentations. Sophia's dramatic flair masked a sensitivity that reminded Catherine of herself at that age. Frederick's defiance seemed born more of restlessness than malice. And Henry, watching his siblings for cues, clearly longed for approval. When the lesson concluded, the children departed with less reluctance than they had shown upon arrival, a small victory that Catherine cherished. She was gathering her materials when a knock came at the door. The Duke entered, his tall frame filling the doorway. Miss Zellwood. I trust my children behaved themselves. They were precisely as I expected, Your Grace. Which means they tested your limits at every opportunity, he said wryly. Catherine smiled. It would be peculiar if they didn't. Children who have experienced upheaval often push boundaries to discover where safety lies. The Duke's expression shifted subtly. You speak as though from experience. As I mentioned to Lady Eleanor, I lost my parents young. My father to illness, my mother to grief shortly thereafter. I am sorry for your loss, he said, and there was a genuine quality to his voice that surprised her. Who raised you? My uncle, a vicar in Shropshire. A kind man, though perhaps bewildered by finding himself guardian to a young girl. The Duke nodded, moving further into the room. He examined the books she had selected for the children's lessons. An ambitious curriculum. They have capable minds, Your Grace. They merely require the right motivation to apply them. And you believe you discovered this motivation in a single afternoon. Not discovered, negotiated, she corrected gently. Children respond well when they feel their preferences are considered. He picked up a volume of poetry she had set aside for Sophia. My wife used to read these to her, he said quietly, almost to himself. The grief in his voice was palpable, and Catherine felt a sudden, unwelcome urge to offer comfort. Your daughter mentioned that her mother loved poetry. She seems to have inherited the appreciation. Yes, Sophia is much like her mother in many ways. He replaced the book carefully. It can be difficult to witness, because it reminds you of your loss. The words escaped before Catherine could consider their propriety. The Duke's gaze snapped to hers, a flash of something, anger? Pain, crossing his features. You are remarkably direct, Miss Zellwood. Forgive me, Your Grace. I spoke out of turn. No, he said after a moment. Directness is preferable to the endless condolences and pitying glances I've endured these 2 years. He moved to the window, looking out over the estate grounds. My wife was, she shone in company. The children adored her, as did everyone who knew her. Catherine remained silent, sensing he rarely spoke of his wife and was unlikely to continue if interrupted. Consumption took her, he added quietly. A cruel, lingering disease that allowed for lengthy goodbyes but offered no mercy in the end. I am truly sorry, Catherine said simply. He nodded once, seeming to remember himself. Yes, well. The children have suffered greatly from her absence. I would have them find some happiness in their studies, at least. That is my aim as well, Your Grace. Good. He straightened, his momentary vulnerability vanishing behind a mask of ducal dignity. I shall leave you to your preparations, then. We dine at 7. My sister will show you to the family dining room. With that, he departed, leaving Catherine with a distinct impression that she had glimpsed something few were permitted to see, the man beneath the title, still raw with grief despite the passage of time. Over the following weeks, Catherine established a routine with the Marlingham children. Mornings were devoted to serious study, afternoons to more engaging pursuits. They read poetry in the garden, conducted science experiments in the kitchens, with the cook's reluctant permission, and took nature walks where Catherine incorporated lessons on botany and natural philosophy. Frederick's pranks decreased markedly after Catherine enlisted his help in designing a water wheel for the stream that ran through the estate gardens. Sophia flourished when given poetry to memorize and perform, discovering that the rhythms helped her remember mathematical principles as well. Henry, no longer overshadowed by his siblings' antics, revealed a talent for languages. The Duke himself remained largely absent, attending to estate business or corresponding with political allies in London. When their paths crossed, he was unfailingly polite but maintained a careful distance that Catherine told herself was entirely appropriate. One rainy afternoon, as Catherine supervised the children's indoor activities in the library, the Duke entered unexpectedly. He paused in the doorway, observing the scene, Frederick constructing a model of the solar system, Sophia translating a simple French story, and Henry carefully copying letters. Your Grace, Catherine acknowledged him with a curtsy. We did not expect you. Evidently, he replied, though his tone held no censure. The rain prevented my ride to the tenant farms. He approached Frederick's project. Jupiter requires more moons, I believe. 16 known ones, Papa, Frederick confirmed. Miss Zellwood says new discoveries are being made all the time. Indeed. The Duke's gaze shifted to Catherine. You've managed to capture my son's attention with astronomy? Remarkable. Master Frederick has a natural curiosity about the world, Catherine replied. As do all your children. Miss Zellwood is teaching me French poetry, Papa, Sophia announced proudly. Would you like to hear the verse I've memorized? I would be delighted, he said, settling into a nearby chair. As Sophia recited a simple verse by Voltaire, Catherine observed the Duke's face. His expression softened as he watched his daughter, pride evident in his eyes. When Henry tugged at his sleeve to show his improved penmanship, the Duke examined the child's work with genuine interest, offering praise that brought a flush of pleasure to the boy's cheeks. This was a different man from the remote figure who had greeted her upon her arrival, a father who clearly adored his children but seemed uncertain how to bridge the gap left by their mother's death. When the children returned to their tasks, the Duke approached Catherine. You've worked wonders, Miss Zellwood. I scarcely recognize my own offspring. They were always thus, Your Grace. They merely needed someone to see past their grief and mischief to the clever children beneath. Just as they needed someone to see past their titles to the children beneath, he responded, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Few govern them without either excessive deference or severity. I found that children, regardless of rank, respond best to honesty and respect. A philosophy that might benefit many adults of my acquaintance as well. His lips quirked in what might have been a smile. Will you walk with me a moment, Miss Zellwood? I would discuss the children's progress in greater detail. Catherine glanced at her charges, who were absorbed in their tasks. Sophia, you're in charge until I return. I expect all of you to continue diligently. The Duke led her to a windowed alcove at the far end of the library, offering some privacy while remaining in view of the children. I received a letter from my sister-in-law in London, he began. She visits next month and expressed concern about the children's education under a country governess. I see. Catherine felt her spine stiffen. And do you share her concern, Your Grace? On the contrary. I wrote to inform her that you have accomplished more in 6 weeks than your predecessors did in months. He hesitated. However, she raised a point I had not considered. The children must eventually take their places in society. Sophia, in particular, will make her debut in a few years. You fear my teaching is too progressive for a duke's daughter. I fear society is too rigid for children raised to think for themselves, he corrected. But they must learn to navigate that world nonetheless. Catherine nodded. I understand, Your Grace. I shall incorporate more lessons on deportment and social expectations. Good. And? He seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. Perhaps you might join us for dinner more regularly. The children would benefit from observing proper table manners and conversation. If you wish it, Your Grace. Catherine was surprised by the invitation. Governesses typically dined with their charges or alone, not with the master of the house. I do. His gaze met hers directly. Your conversation would be a welcome addition. Before Catherine could respond, a crash from across the library drew their attention. Frederick had knocked over a globe in his enthusiasm to show his sibling something about the planet's orbits. I believe duty calls, Miss Zellwood, the Duke said, a hint of amusement in his voice. We shall continue this discussion at dinner. That evening, Catherine dressed with particular care in her best gown, a modest creation of deep blue muslin that her uncle's wife had insisted was flattering to her complexion. She arranged her light brown hair in a simple but elegant style and added her mother's pearl earrings, the only fine jewelry she possessed. At dinner, she found herself seated to the Duke's left, with Lady Eleanor opposite and the children arranged between them. The conversation flowed more easily than she had anticipated, with the children eager to share their day's accomplishments. Miss Zellwood says I have a talent for languages, Papa, Henry announced. She's teaching me Latin phrases. Is she indeed? The Duke raised an eyebrow. And what have you learned thus far? Henry straightened in his chair. Ordices fortuna juvat. Fortune favors the bold, the Duke translated, looking impressed. A worthy sentiment, though one that has led your brother into numerous scrapes, I fear. Frederick grinned unrepentantly. Miss Zellwood says calculated risks are different from recklessness. A fine distinction, the Duke replied, his gaze shifting to Catherine. And one that suggests Miss Zellwood has taken your measure accurately. I merely observe, Your Grace, Catherine demurred. Your children reveal their characters in their approaches to learning. And what have they revealed to you? Lady Eleanor inquired, genuine curiosity in her voice. Catherine considered her words carefully. Miss Sophia possesses a romantic sensibility balanced by practical intelligence. Master Frederick has an engineer's mind, he sees how parts connect to create a whole. And Master Henry observes everything, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. Remarkably astute, the Duke commented. You've known them only weeks, yet you discerned qualities I've observed over years. Perhaps, Lady Eleanor suggested with a slight smile, Miss Zellwood sees them clearly because she approaches them as students rather than as a father's beloved but occasionally vexing offspring. A diplomatic way of suggesting I am either too indulgent or too demanding, the Duke replied, though without heat. Which is it, Miss Zellwood? Do I spoil my children or expect too much from them? Catherine felt all eyes upon her. I would not presume to judge, Your Grace. Come now, that's diplomatic avoidance, he pressed, though his eyes held a glimmer of amusement. You clearly have an opinion. I should like to hear it. Catherine took a breath. I believe you love your children deeply but are uncertain how to express that love without their mother's mediating presence. You alternate between indulgence born of guilt and strictness born of fear, guilt that you cannot fill the void left in their lives, and fear that without proper guidance, they will be unprepared for the world they must eventually face. A profound silence fell over the table. Even the children seemed to hold their breath. The Duke's expression was unreadable for a long moment. Then, to Catherine's surprise, he laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. Direct indeed, Miss Zellwood. And uncomfortably perceptive. Forgive me, Your Grace. I spoke out of turn. Not at all. I asked for your opinion, and you gave it honestly. His gaze held hers. A refreshing quality, though one that would scandalize half the ton. Most of the ton could benefit from occasional candor, Lady Eleanor remarked dryly. Particularly when it comes to child rearing. So many of our peers delegate their children's upbringing entirely, then wonder why they grow into strangers. The conversation moved to safer topics, but Catherine occasionally caught the Duke observing her with thoughtful consideration. When dinner concluded, he asked her to remain while Lady Eleanor took the children to the drawing-room for their evening hour of family time. "You must think me a poor father," he said once they were alone, swirling the brandy in his glass. "On the contrary, Your Grace. Many fathers of your station would scarcely know their children at all." "A low standard to exceed," he replied with self-deprecation. "Elizabeth, my wife, she knew instinctively how to nurture them, when to discipline, when to comfort. I find myself constantly questioning my decisions." "All conscientious parents do, I imagine," Catherine said gently. "Do they? I wouldn't know. My own father was a distant figure who emerged from his study primarily to express disappointment." He set down his glass. "But enough of this melancholy. Will you join us in the drawing-room? Henry has been hoping you might read from that book of Norse legends he's become enamored with." "I would be delighted, Your Grace." As they walked together toward the drawing-room, the Duke asked, "Have you ever considered having children of your own, Miss Zellwood?" The question startled her. I haven't given it much thought. My circumstances." "Forgive me," he said immediately. "That was inappropriately personal." "No, it's a fair question, given my profession." Catherine gathered her composure. "I love children, obviously. But a governess rarely has the opportunity for marriage and a family of her own." "A waste," he murmured, almost to himself. "Then, more clearly, you have a natural gift with them. My children have flourished under your care these past weeks." "Thank you, Your Grace. That means a great deal coming from their father." He paused at the drawing-room door, turning to face her fully. "I've been remiss in expressing my gratitude. You've brought life back to this household, Miss Zellwood." Something in his gaze, an intensity, a warmth, sent an unwelcome flutter through Catherine's chest. She lowered her eyes, suddenly conscious of their proximity. "I merely do my duty, Your Grace." "No," he said softly. "What you do goes well beyond duty. But come, the children await us." The evening passed pleasantly, with Catherine reading Norse tales while the children listened, enraptured. The Duke, seated in a wing-back chair by the fire, watched with an expression of contentment that transformed his usually serious countenance. Later, as Catherine prepared for bed, she found herself replaying their conversation. The Duke's words about bringing life back to the household lingered in her mind. It was a kind sentiment, nothing more, she told herself firmly. He was grateful to her as his children's governess, not what? She wondered, catching her own reflection in the looking-glass. Surely she wasn't entertaining romantic notions about the Duke of Marlingham. Such thoughts were not merely inappropriate but potentially ruinous. She was a governess, he was one of the highest-ranking peers in England. Even if he weren't still devoted to his late wife's memory, the gulf between them was unbridgeable. Catherine extinguished her candle, determined to put such foolish thoughts from her mind. She was here to educate his children, not to lose her heart to their father. The next morning, Catherine woke to the sound of steady rain against her windows. The gloomy weather matched her mood as she dressed for the day, firmly reminding herself of her place in the household. In the schoolroom, she found the children listless, the rain having dashed their hopes for an outdoor nature lesson. "We'll never see the stages of a butterfly's life cycle now," Sophia lamented, chin propped on her hand as she stared out at the dreary landscape. "Nature continues its work rain or shine," Catherine replied. "In fact, many creatures depend upon rainy days. Perhaps we might shift our focus to the question of why rain falls and how it sustains life." This launched a discussion of weather patterns that engaged even Frederick, particularly when Catherine proposed they construct a device to measure rainfall. By mid-morning, the children were absorbed in their projects, the grey day forgotten. They were interrupted by a knock at the schoolroom door. The Duke entered, accompanied by a striking woman dressed in the height of London fashion. "Children, your Aunt Victoria has arrived," he announced. The Dowager Countess of Ravenscroft, the Duke's sister-in-law, swept into the room in a rustle of expensive silk. She was beautiful in a calculating way, with sharp eyes that missed nothing as they assessed first the children, then Catherine. "My darlings," she cooed, extending her arms. The children dutifully lined up to receive her embrace, though Catherine noted that only Henry seemed genuinely pleased by the interruption. "How you've grown! Sophia, you're becoming quite the young lady." "Thank you, Aunt Victoria," Sophia replied with perfect politeness, though Catherine detected a slight stiffening in her posture. "And this must be Miss Zellwood, was it?" The Countess turned her attention to Catherine, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Kendrick has written that you're working wonders with the children. They deserve all credit for their progress, my lady," Catherine curtsied. "They are exceptionally bright." Naturally, the Countess agreed, as though their intelligence were directly attributable to their bloodline. Marlingham children have always excelled academically. Their mother was particularly accomplished, fluent in 4 languages and a talented pianist. Catherine didn't miss the implication. The late Duchess had set a standard that a mere governess could hardly hope to match. "Her Grace's influence is evident in the children's natural aptitudes," she replied diplomatically. The Duke, who had remained by the door observing the exchange, now stepped forward. "Victoria, I'm sure you'd like to refresh yourself after your journey. The children will join us for tea in the drawing room at 4. "Of course." The Countess turned to the children. "I've brought presents from London. We shall have a splendid visit." After she departed, the Duke lingered. "My sister-in-law will be with us for a fortnight," he informed Catherine. "She has strong opinions regarding the children's education." "I understand, Your Grace." "Do you?" His voice lowered. "Victoria believes titles and connections are the only education that matters. She would have Sophia learning nothing but deportment and Frederick nothing but how to manage his future title." "And what do you believe, Your Grace?" He considered her question seriously. "I believe my children should be prepared for their positions in society without sacrificing their intellects or curiosity." A wry smile touched his lips. "A balance you seem to have struck naturally." "Thank you, Your Grace. I would ask—" He hesitated. "During Victoria's stay, you may find her attempting to countermand your methods. If so, please come to me directly rather than altering your approach." "As you wish." Catherine was surprised by his explicit support. "Good." He nodded once, then addressed the children. "Behave for Miss Zellwood, and I shall see you at tea." The Countess's influence became apparent almost immediately. At tea, she regaled the children with stories of London society, emphasizing the importance of proper connections and fashionable accomplishments. "Sophia, dear, you really must focus more on your music," she advised. "A young lady's performance at the pianoforte can secure vital introductions during her debut season." "Miss Sophia has shown considerable talent in music," Catherine offered. "She has been practicing Haydn sonatas." The Countess raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "Haydn? Rather ambitious, surely. Mozart's simpler pieces would be more appropriate for drawing-room performances." "Sophia plays beautifully," the Duke interjected. "Miss Zellwood has encouraged her natural abilities." "Yes, well." The Countess smiled thinly. "One must consider what will serve her best in society, Kendrick. Technical skill matters less than pleasing presentation." "Aunt Victoria," Frederick piped up, "Miss Zellwood has been teaching us about astronomy. Did you know Jupiter has 16 moons?" "How unusual," the Countess replied, her tone making clear her opinion of such knowledge for a future duke. "Though I suppose scientific curiosities have their place. Your uncle, Lord Ravenscroft, occasionally attends lectures at the Royal Society." Catherine caught the Duke's eye across the table. A barely perceptible shake of his head advised patience. Over the following days, the Countess's interference grew more direct. She appeared in the schoolroom unannounced, critiqued lesson plans, and scheduled extra deportment practice for Sophia that cut into her regular studies. She insisted Frederick accompany his father to tenant meetings instead of completing his mathematics work, arguing that estate management was more important than abstract figures. Most concerning to Catherine was the Countess's obvious favoritism. She lavished attention on Sophia and Frederick while largely ignoring Henry, whose shy nature made him easy to overlook. Catherine observed the youngest Marlingham child withdrawing further into himself, quiet and watchful. One afternoon, while Sophia was engaged in a deportment lesson with the Countess and Frederick was with his father, Catherine found Henry alone in the library, curled in a window seat with his book of Norse legends. "Master Henry," she greeted him gently. "Why are you reading here instead of in the schoolroom?" He shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "Aunt Victoria says I mustn't disturb Sophia's lessons." Catherine sat beside him. "Your aunt means well, but she doesn't know you as I do. She says I'm too quiet," Henry confided. "That I must learn to assert myself if I'm to make my way in the world." "There is strength in quietness too," Catherine told him. "The greatest scholars often speak the least because they're busy observing and thinking." Henry considered this. "Like Thor's brother Loki in my stories? He uses his mind instead of strength." Catherine smiled. "Exactly. Though perhaps with more honorable intentions than Loki sometimes shows." "Miss Zellwood." Henry's voice grew hesitant. "Will you leave us?" Aunt Victoria told Sophia that governesses never stay, especially not with difficult children like us. The question pierced Catherine's heart. "I have no intention of leaving, Master Henry. I'm very happy teaching you and your siblings." "Promise?" His small face was solemn. Catherine hesitated, knowing promises to children should never be made lightly. "I promise to do everything in my power to remain your governess for as long as you need me." This seemed to satisfy him. They read together until it was time for the evening meal. Henry's spirits noticeably lifted. At dinner, the Countess dominated the conversation with tales of London society and not-so-subtle hints about the Duke's need to remarry. "Lady Harrington inquired after you most particularly when I saw her at Lady Jersey's ball," she informed him. "Her daughter, Miss Harrington, has just completed her first season. A lovely girl with an excellent dowry and impeccable connections." "How fortunate for her," the Duke replied dryly. "I'm sure she'll make some ambitious young lord very happy." "Kendrick," the Countess chided, "you cannot remain a widower forever. The children need a mother's guidance." An uncomfortable silence fell. Catherine kept her eyes fixed on her plate, acutely aware of her presence at this family discussion. "My children have excellent guidance at present," the Duke finally said, his tone brooking no argument. "And my marital status is not a suitable topic for the dinner table." The Countess subsided temporarily, but after the children had been excused, she renewed her campaign. "Miss Zellwood seems competent enough in academic matters," she conceded, "but a governess cannot provide the social connections these children will require. Particularly Sophia, she'll need introductions that only a properly connected stepmother could provide." "Victoria," Lady Eleanor interjected, "my brother will remarry when and if he chooses. Until then, the children are thriving under Miss Zellwood's care. I merely think that I should marry for the convenience of society rather than any personal inclination," the Duke interrupted, his patience clearly wearing thin. "I've made my position clear on this matter." Catherine, feeling increasingly uncomfortable, rose from her seat. "If you'll excuse me, I should check on the children before they retire." "Of course, Miss Zellwood," Lady Eleanor said kindly. As Catherine departed, she heard the Countess remark, "Really, Kendrick, including the governess in family dinners sets a peculiar precedent." Catherine didn't hear the Duke's reply, but her cheeks burned as she hurried up the stairs. The Countess was right, of course. She had allowed herself to forget her place, encouraged by the Duke's unusual courtesy. That night, a violent storm lashed the estate. Catherine was awakened by a timid knock at her door shortly after midnight. She found Henry in his nightshirt, trembling. "The thunder," he whispered. It sounds like giants fighting, like in my stories. Oh, Henry. She knelt before him. It's only clouds bumping together, causing lightning and sound. A particularly loud thunderclap made him jump. May I stay with you? Just until it passes. Catherine hesitated. It wasn't entirely proper, but the child was genuinely frightened. Very well, but just until the storm moves on. She settled him in her bed and sat in the nearby chair, telling him stories until his eyelids grew heavy. The storm showed no signs of abating, however, and Catherine herself began to doze. She was startled awake by another knock. Assuming it was one of the other children, she opened the door without thinking, only to find the Duke standing there in his dressing gown, a candle in his hand. Your Grace! Catherine clutched her wrapper closer. Is something wrong? Henry is missing from his bed, he explained, his voice low with concern. I checked on the children when the storm grew worse, and he broke off, catching sight of his youngest son asleep in Catherine's bed. Ah. I see he sought refuge here. He was frightened by the thunder, Catherine explained quickly. I was going to return him to his room once he fell asleep, but I fear I dozed off myself. I apologize for the impropriety. The Duke's expression softened as he looked at his son. No apology needed. He used to go to his mother during storms. He met Catherine's eyes. Thank you for comforting him. Of course. Neither moved for a moment. The intimate tableau, Catherine in her nightclothes, the Duke similarly attired, a sleeping child between them, seemed to exist outside the normal boundaries of their relationship. I should take him back to his room, the Duke said finally. Yes, that would be best. The Duke carefully lifted Henry, who stirred but didn't wake fully. Good night, Miss Zellwood, he murmured, his voice oddly gentle. Good night, Your Grace. After he departed, Catherine found sleep elusive. Something had shifted between them tonight, something indefinable but significant. She told herself it was merely the unusual circumstance of the storm and Henry's fear, nothing more. But in the quiet darkness, she could no longer deny the truth she had been avoiding. She was developing feelings for the Duke of Marlingham that went far beyond the appropriate respect of an employee for her employer. The next morning brought clear skies and, for Catherine, a renewed determination to maintain proper professional boundaries. When she encountered the Duke in the corridor outside the schoolroom, she kept her greeting formal and brief. Miss Zellwood, he called as she turned to enter the schoolroom. A moment, if you please. She faced him reluctantly. Yes, Your Grace. I wanted to thank you again for your kindness to Henry last night. He mentioned at breakfast that you told him there is strength in quietness. A smile touched his lips. A wise observation. Master Henry has depths that are easy to overlook, she replied. He notices everything but speaks only when he has something meaningful to contribute. Like his mother, the Duke said softly. Then, more briskly, I also wish to inform you that my sister-in-law departs 3 days hence. She has been invited to a house party at Lord Pembroke's estate. I see. Catherine was ashamed at the relief she felt. The children will miss her, I'm sure. Will they? His eyebrow arched skeptically. Victoria means well, but her visits often leave them more unsettled than cheered. He hesitated. I hope you will not take her comments regarding your position to heart. She sees the world through a particular lens, one focused exclusively on titles and connections. It's quite all right, Your Grace. I understand my place. Something flickered in his eyes at her words. Do you? I wonder if I understand mine anymore. Before she could puzzle out his meaning, he continued, the rain has cleared. Perhaps the children's nature studies might resume this afternoon. An excellent suggestion, Your Grace. He nodded once and departed, leaving Catherine with the unsettling feeling that something important had been left unsaid. The Countess's remaining days at Thornfield Hall passed without further incident, though her pointed remarks about suitable activities for the children continued. When her carriage finally departed, Catherine sensed the entire household releasing a collective breath. That evening at dinner, the atmosphere was noticeably lighter. The children chattered freely, Lady Eleanor smiled more readily, and even the Duke seemed less constrained. "I propose an expedition," he announced as dessert was served. "The weather promises to be fine tomorrow, and there's a ruined abbey some 5 miles from here that might interest you all. We could pack a picnic luncheon." The children responded with enthusiasm, and plans were quickly made. To Catherine's surprise, the Duke included her in the invitation without hesitation. "You must come, Miss Zellwood," Sophia insisted. "You can tell us all about the Abbey's architecture and history." "If your father approves," Catherine demurred. "I insist," the Duke said. The expedition would be incomplete without our resident scholar. The following day dawned bright and clear. The children could scarcely contain their excitement as they set out in 2 carriages, the Duke driving an open phaeton with Frederick beside him, while Catherine, Sophia, and Henry travelled with Lady Eleanor in the larger carriage. The Abbey ruins proved as magnificent as promised, a 12th-century structure now open to the sky, with soaring arches and intricate stonework still visible among the ivy. While the children explored under Lady Eleanor's supervision, Catherine found herself walking alongside the Duke through what had once been the nave. "It's beautiful," she remarked, gazing up at the remains of a rose window. "Even in decay." "Perhaps especially in decay," he replied. "There's honesty in ruins, no pretense, only what has endured." "A rather philosophical observation, Your Grace." "Kendrick," he said suddenly. "I beg your pardon." "My name is Kendrick. When we are away from the formality of the house, I would ask you to use it." He must have noted her surprise, for he added, "if you're comfortable doing so." That would hardly be appropriate, Your Grace." "Would it not?" "I find I care less for propriety these days than for authenticity." He gestured toward the Abbey ruins. "Like these stones, I've found that after loss, only what is genuine remains." Catherine didn't know how to respond to this unexpected overture. "The children will wonder where we've gone," she said finally. "Indeed." He offered his arm. "Shall we join them? I believe Henry has discovered what may be a medieval gargoyle." The remainder of the day passed pleasantly. They picnicked on a grassy knoll overlooking the ruins, the children peppering Catherine with questions about medieval life that she answered to the best of her knowledge. The Duke contributed occasional historical details, revealing a scholarly side that surprised her. As they prepared to depart, Henry tugged at Catherine's hand. "This has been the best day," he declared. "Almost like having a proper family again." The innocent observation hung in the air. Catherine saw Lady Eleanor's quick glance toward her brother, whose expression had grown unreadable. The journey home was subdued, each adult lost in their own thoughts while the children, tired from the day's adventures, dozed against the carriage cushions. That evening, after the children had been put to bed, Catherine found herself unable to settle. She made her way to the library, hoping to find a book that might distract her from her confused emotions. She was surprised to discover the Duke already there, standing by the window with a glass of brandy in his hand. "Your Grace," she acknowledged, preparing to retreat. "Forgive the intrusion." "No intrusion," he said. "Please, join me if you wish." Catherine hesitated, then entered, selecting a volume of poetry from a nearby shelf more for appearance's sake than any real interest. "Did you enjoy today's expedition?" he asked, turning from the window. "Very much." The children were delighted. "As was I." He set down his glass and approached her. "Miss Zellwood, Catherine, there is something I must say to you." The use of her Christian name sent a jolt through her. "Your Grace, I don't think, Kendrick," he corrected gently. "At least here, now, when we are alone." "We shouldn't be alone," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "It isn't proper." "No, it isn't." He took a step closer. "Yet here we are." Catherine clutched the book to her chest like a shield. "Your Grace, Kendrick, whatever you wish to say, I fear it can lead nowhere good. I am your children's governess. You are a duke. There are boundaries that cannot be crossed." "Cannot?" Or should not? His gaze held hers. I have observed you these past months, your intelligence, your kindness, your genuine affection for my children. I have watched you bring joy back into their lives, and, I confess, into mine as well. Please, Catherine whispered, don't say more. I must. I have lived half a life since Elizabeth died, focused only on duty and responsibility. I never expected to feel. He paused, searching for words. To feel awake again. Your feelings are natural, Catherine said carefully. You've been alone, and I represent a connection to your children's happiness. But that doesn't mean, don't, he interrupted, a flash of something like hurt crossing his features. Don't diminish what I feel by explaining it away. I know my own mind, Catherine. Do you? Society would never accept such a connection. Your peers, your family, they would ostracize you. And the children would suffer for it. Society, he said with sudden vehemence, has dictated my choices my entire life. My first marriage was approved by everyone, a perfect alliance of bloodlines and fortunes. That it became a love match was mere fortunate chance. A chance that proved the wisdom of society's rules, Catherine pointed out. You loved your Duchess. You still do. Yes, he admitted. I will always love Elizabeth. But she is gone, and I am still here, still living. He moved closer still. Tell me you feel nothing, and I will never speak of this again. Catherine couldn't meet his eyes. What I feel doesn't matter. It is all that matters. His voice softened. Catherine, look at me. When she raised her gaze to his, she saw not the Duke of Marlingham but simply Kendrick, a man who had known grief and was reaching, perhaps desperately, toward happiness. I cannot offer what you deserve, she said finally. Your children need stability, not scandal. And you should marry someone who can stand beside you in society without causing whispers. I've had that marriage, he replied. If I marry again, it will be for love alone. Before Catherine could respond, the library door opened. Lady Eleanor entered, stopping short when she saw them standing so close together. Forgive me, she said after a moment. I didn't realize the library was occupied. Catherine stepped back hastily. I was just leaving, my lady. Good night, Your Grace. She fled to her room, her heart pounding and her thoughts in disarray. The Duke's words echoed in her mind, if I marry again, it will be for love alone. Marriage. He had spoken of marriage, not some dishonorable arrangement. The notion was both thrilling and terrifying. Even if he truly meant it, the reality of a duke marrying his children's governess would create a scandal that would follow them all for years. Catherine barely slept that night, turning the conversation over in her mind. By morning, she had reached a painful decision: she must leave Thornfield Hall. Her growing feelings for the Duke threatened not only her own future but, more importantly, the well-being of the children she had come to love. After breakfast, she requested a private audience with Lady Eleanor, who received her in the morning room with evident concern. Is something amiss, Miss Zellwood? You seem troubled. My lady, I find I must tender my resignation, Catherine said, her voice surprisingly steady despite her inner turmoil. I have received word from my uncle that he is unwell, and requires my assistance. Lady Eleanor's expression revealed her skepticism. This is sudden indeed. The children will be devastated. I regret that deeply. They have made remarkable progress, and I've grown very fond of them. But family duty must take precedence. I see. Lady Eleanor studied her for a long moment. Does my brother know of your decision? Not yet. I thought it proper to inform you first, as you arranged my employment. How considerate. Lady Eleanor's tone was dry. And this decision has nothing to do with the scene I interrupted in the library last evening. Catherine felt colour rise to her cheeks. My lady, I assure you, Miss Zellwood, Lady Eleanor interrupted gently, I have observed my brother these past months. He has changed since your arrival, become more himself again, less the shadow he was after Elizabeth's death. The children, too, have blossomed under your care. Whatever passed between you last night, I ask that you not make hasty decisions that might harm them all. It is precisely because I care for them that I must go, Catherine replied. Surely you understand that any improper attachment between your brother and myself could only lead to scandal and unhappiness. Improper? Lady Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Is genuine affection improper? Is finding joy after sorrow a sin? For people in our respective positions, yes, Catherine said firmly. The Duke will recover from any momentary infatuation. The children will adapt to a new governess. It is better I leave before any permanent damage is done. Lady Eleanor sighed. You underestimate both my brother's feelings and the children's attachment to you. But I cannot force you to stay. When do you propose to depart? As soon as arrangements can be made. Tomorrow, if possible. So quickly? At least allow the children time to adjust to the idea. Catherine hesitated. Very well. 3 days, then. I shall inform my brother, Lady Eleanor said, rising. Though I think you should tell him your reasons yourself. My lady, please, he deserves that much honesty, at least. Catherine couldn't argue with that assessment, painful though it might be to face him again after their conversation in the library. I shall speak with him before I go. The children's reaction to the news was as heartbreaking as Catherine had feared. Sophia burst into tears, Frederick demanded explanations Catherine couldn't provide, and Henry simply stared at her with betrayal written across his small features. You promised, he said finally, his voice small. You promised you wouldn't leave us. I said I would stay as long as I could, Catherine reminded him gently, though the distinction offered little comfort. My uncle needs me now. We need you too, Sophia sobbed. It's not fair. Sometimes life isn't fair, my dear, Catherine told her, fighting back her own tears. But you are strong and clever, and you will continue to learn and grow even without me. Frederick, always perceptive, narrowed his eyes. You're not really leaving because of your uncle, are you? It's because of something else. Catherine met his gaze steadily. Sometimes adults must make difficult decisions for complex reasons, Master Frederick. But I want you to know that leaving you and your siblings is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. This was, at least, entirely truthful. The Duke himself was conspicuously absent throughout the day. Lady Eleanor informed Catherine that he had ridden out early and was not expected to return until evening. Whether this was by design or coincidence, Catherine couldn't be certain. She spent the day organizing her teaching materials and writing detailed notes for her successor, outlining each child's strengths, challenges, and interests. It was meticulous work that occupied her hands while her mind replayed every moment she had spent with the Duke, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. As evening fell, Catherine made her way to the library, drawn by a need to memorize the room where she had spent so many happy hours with the children, and where, just last night, the Duke had spoken words she would carry with her always. She was tracing the spine of a volume of Shakespeare's sonnets when the door opened behind her. I'm told you're leaving us, the Duke said without preamble. Catherine turned slowly to face him. He looked weary, as though he had ridden far and hard. Yes, Your Grace. My uncle is unwell and requires my care. Your uncle? His tone made it clear he recognized the excuse for what it was. How convenient that his illness coincides so precisely with our conversation last night. Your Grace, at least have the courage to tell me the truth, he said, his voice low but intense. You're running away. Yes, she admitted after a moment. I am. Because what you suggested cannot be. Cannot? Or will not? He moved toward her, closing the distance between them. I spoke honestly of my feelings, Catherine. Have you the courage to do the same? Catherine straightened her spine. Very well. I care for you deeply, more than is proper, more than is wise. I have come to love your children as though they were my own. And it is precisely because of these feelings that I must go. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense. I am a governess, the niece of a country vicar. You are the Duke of Marlingham. Any connection between us beyond employer and employee would create a scandal that would harm you, your children, and your position in society. And if I care nothing for society's opinion. But you should, she insisted. Your children will one day take their places in that society. Sophia will make her debut, Frederick will inherit your title. Do you wish them to face whispers and closed doors because their father married beneath him? Beneath me? His expression darkened. Is that how you see yourself? It's how the world sees me, regardless of how you or I might wish it otherwise. He took another step closer. The world changes, Catherine. Boundaries shift. What seemed impossible yesterday may be merely difficult tomorrow. And in the meantime? Would you make your children targets for gossip and cruelty? They are stronger than you think, he said softly. As am I. Please, Catherine whispered, her resolve weakening under his steady gaze. Don't make this harder than it already is. I must. He reached for her hand, holding it gently between both of his. Because if you leave believing you're protecting us from some terrible fate, you'll never know what might have been possible. Kendrick. His name on her lips felt like surrender. Stay, he said simply. Not as the children's governess, if that role no longer suits. But stay and let us discover what this feeling between us might become. Catherine closed her eyes, torn between what her heart desired and what her conscience demanded. I need time to think. Then take it. But promise me you won't leave without speaking to me again. I promise, she whispered. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth spreading through her entire body. Thank you. After he departed, Catherine remained in the library, her emotions in turmoil. The practical part of her mind insisted that leaving was the only sensible course. But her heart whispered of possibilities she had never dared imagine. She was still sitting there when Lady Eleanor found her an hour later. I see my brother found you, she observed, taking the chair opposite Catherine. And you appear less resolved to depart than you were this morning. I don't know what to do, Catherine admitted. My feelings for your brother and the children war with my understanding of what is proper and possible. Lady Eleanor considered her thoughtfully. May I tell you something of my brother? Something few people know. Catherine nodded. Kendrick's marriage to Elizabeth was arranged by our father, a brilliant match of title and fortune that pleased both families enormously. Kendrick was 22, Elizabeth barely 19. They had met only twice before their wedding day. But they came to love each other, Catherine said. That much is clear from how he speaks of her. Yes, they did. But not immediately, and not without difficulty. Lady Eleanor's expression grew distant. Elizabeth was beautiful, accomplished, and utterly terrified of disappointing our father, who was a formidable man. She performed her duties perfectly but kept herself separate, afraid to reveal her true thoughts or feelings. What changed? Kendrick did. He recognized her unhappiness and made it his mission to know the real Elizabeth, not the perfect duchess she presented to the world. When she finally trusted him enough to be herself, with all her doubts and dreams and imperfections, that's when they truly fell in love. Why are you telling me this? Because, Lady Eleanor said gently, my brother values authenticity above all else. Elizabeth taught him that. In you, he has found someone who speaks her mind, who sees him as a man rather than a title, who loves his children for themselves rather than their prospects. That is rare, Miss Zellwood, especially in our circle. But society gossips for a season, then finds new targets, Lady Eleanor interrupted. Believe me, I know. I caused my own minor scandal when I refused Lord Pembroke's offer and declared my intention to remain unwed. There were whispers for a time, but they faded. What endures is the life one builds according to one's own heart. Catherine was silent for a long moment, absorbing these words. You truly believe a match between your brother and me could succeed? I believe happiness should never be discarded out of fear, Lady Eleanor replied. But the decision is yours, of course. She rose to leave. Whatever you choose, know that you have my respect and gratitude for all you've done for this family." After another sleepless night, Catherine rose early and walked in the gardens, hoping the fresh air might clear her mind. The children would be devastated if she left, that much was certain. And her own heart rebelled at the thought of never seeing them, or their father, again. Was Lady Eleanor right? Could society's disapproval be weathered? And was the Duke truly prepared for the consequences of such an unconventional choice? As the sun rose higher, Catherine made her way back toward the house. She had nearly reached the terrace when she spotted Henry sitting alone on a stone bench, his expression forlorn. "Master Henry," she greeted him. "You're up early." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed as though he had been crying. "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about you leaving us." Catherine sat beside him. "I've been thinking about that too. Papa was very sad last night," Henry said matter-of-factly. "He tried to hide it, but I could tell. He locked himself in his study after dinner and didn't come out, even when I knocked to say good night." The simple observation pierced Catherine's heart. "Your father has many responsibilities that weigh on him." "He was happier when you came," Henry said. "We all were. It felt like a family again." Catherine put her arm around his small shoulders. "Oh, Henry. Please don't go," he whispered. "Please stay with us." In that moment, looking into the earnest face of this child who had claimed a piece of her heart, Catherine's doubts crystallized into certainty. The risks were real, the challenges significant. But what she felt for this family, for the Duke, for his children, was worth fighting for. "I need to speak with your father," she said finally. "Will you help me find him?" Henry's face brightened with hope. "He always rides early in the morning. He should be returning to the stables soon." Hand in hand, they made their way to the stables. As Henry had predicted, the Duke was just dismounting when they arrived, handing his horse to a waiting groom. He stilled when he saw them, his expression cautious. "Henry." "Miss Zellwood. You're both up early." "Miss Zellwood wants to talk to you, Papa," Henry announced. "It's important." "Is that so?" The Duke's gaze met Catherine's, a question in his eyes. "Yes," she confirmed softly. "Very well." He turned to his son. "Henry, would you ask Mrs. Simmons to prepare some breakfast? Miss Zellwood and I will join you shortly." After Henry had departed, an expectant silence fell between them. "You wanted to speak with me," the Duke finally prompted. "Yes." Catherine took a deep breath. "I've been considering your words, and Lady Eleanor's, and I've decided not to leave." Relief flashed across his features. "I'm glad to hear it. But," she continued carefully, "I can't remain as the children's governess if there is to be anything between us. It would be inappropriate." "I agree," he said, stepping closer. "Which is why I have a different proposal in mind." "Kendrick, marry me," he said simply. Though she had half expected it, the directness of his proposal still took her breath away. "Are you certain?" "The consequences will be nothing compared to the regret of letting you go," he finished for her. "Catherine, I have lived by society's rules my entire life. I married the woman my father chose, I manage my estates as duty demands, I take my place in Parliament even when I'd rather be here with my children. The one area where I refuse to bow to convention is in matters of the heart." "It won't be easy," she warned. "Few worthwhile things are." His eyes held hers. "I don't offer you a simple path, but I do offer my heart, my name, and my promise to stand beside you, whatever comes." "And the children? Have you considered how they might feel?" A smile touched his lips. "They adore you already. Henry has been campaigning for your permanent presence since your second week here. Sophia asked me outright last month if I had considered that you might make a suitable mother for them. Even Frederick, who guards his opinions carefully, remarked that you understand him better than anyone since his mother died." Catherine felt tears welling in her eyes. "I love them as though they were my own." "I know." He reached for her hand. That's part of why I love you." The words, spoken so simply, seemed to hang in the air between them. "You love me," she whispered. "With all my heart," he confirmed. "I didn't expect to find love again, Catherine. I had resigned myself to a half-life of duty and distant affection. You awakened something I thought had died with Elizabeth, not just the capacity for love, but the courage to reach for happiness." Catherine's last defenses crumbled. "I love you too," she admitted. "I tried not to. I told myself it was impossible, inappropriate, doomed to failure. But my heart wouldn't listen. Thank God for that." He stepped closer still, cupping her face in his hands. "Will you marry me, Catherine Zellwood? Will you be my wife, a mother to my children, and my partner in whatever life brings us?" "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." His kiss was gentle at first, then increasingly passionate as she responded in kind. When they finally parted, both breathing quickly, he rested his forehead against hers. "My sister will be insufferably pleased with herself," he murmured. "She's been hinting for weeks that I should offer you more than a governess's position." Catherine laughed softly. "She may have offered similar hints to me." "We should tell the children," he said. "They'll be overjoyed." As predicted, the news was received with enthusiasm bordering on hysteria. Sophia actually danced around the breakfast room, Frederick grinned more widely than Catherine had ever seen, and Henry threw his arms around her with such force he nearly knocked her from her chair. "Does this mean you're staying forever?" he demanded. "It does indeed," Catherine assured him, meeting Kendrick's gaze over the child's head. The Duke's smile held promise, joy, and a touch of mischief. "Forever," he confirmed. "Though I fear Miss Zellwood will have to become accustomed to a new title." "Will we still have lessons?" Frederick inquired practically. "Of course," Catherine replied. "Though perhaps we'll need to engage another governess to assist, as I'll have additional responsibilities as your father's wife." "No more governesses," Sophia declared firmly. "We shall learn from you, and when you're busy with Duchess duties, we shall study independently." A diplomatic compromise, Kendrick approved. "It seems your negotiation skills have rubbed off on the children already, my dear." There would be challenges ahead, Catherine knew. Society would whisper, some doors might close, and adjusting to her new role would require patience and courage. But looking around the table at the family that would soon be hers in truth as well as in her heart, she felt only certainty and joy. She had come to Thornfield Hall to teach the Duke's children, never imagining that in doing so, she would help their father remember how to love again, or that she would find her own heart's desire in the process. As Kendrick reached across the table to take her hand, his eyes full of promise, Catherine knew that some risks were worth taking, some conventions worth challenging, and some loves worth fighting for. This was one such love, and she would cherish it always.